Okay, welcome everybody. I'm going to be kicking off our virtual book event with our special guest, Phil Lee, author of, sorry, I don't know if this is backwards, but the book Cultural Kaiseki, A Journey Through Offbeat Japan. And so during this time, we're going to hear from Phil about his experiences and travel tips for traveling to Japan, as well as his own book that came into fruition. We'll also have a Q&A session at the very end, so please feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go along tonight. My name is Lori Takeda. I'm a Kaisei intern at in the programs department at the center, or the JCCC-NC. This summer, and a little bit about me, I'm from the East Bay area, and I'm attending San Jose State this year. I'll be graduating at the end of the year with my bachelor's degree in fine arts in digital media art. And I've been interning at the center for the past, I think now it's 9 weeks. I'll be ending my internship with the center next week, but I've really been enjoying my time and being able to see Japantown and getting to meet the people there. So now I'd like to introduce Phil, and he's our special guest speaker for tonight. Some background on Phil: he was born in Korea and raised in the US. He traveled around at a young age and lived in very diverse places such as New York, Korea, California, Florida, and China. And for him, he became accustomed to new culture and environments. And that was nothing new when he started traveling to Japan for frequent business trips. And he has more than 50 trips to Japan under his belt, and just his appreciation and love for Japanese culture grows with every visit. And Cultural Kaiseki is his first book about his journey through Japan. And so Cultural Kaiseki kind of brings a new, unique look at the different sides of Japan that aren't really seen by foreigners. Phil goes beyond the usual tourist spots to seek out hidden gems. This book is like a collection of stories and experiences presented in small segments, kind of like Japanese kaiseki meal, where several small bite-sized stories of discovery and adventure that add up to a larger understanding of the Japanese culture. So this is kind of like a nice thing because whether you've gone to Japan before or you haven't gone to Japan before, there's always something new for you to, I guess, see and look for. So Phil, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
All right. Thanks, Laurie. Thanks, everyone, for attending. Like Laurie said, I'm not Japanese. I was born in Korea. I immigrated to the US when I was pretty young. I was like 6 years old. I grew up primarily in the South, in Alabama, where there are very few Asians, compared to California, which is where I live now. So I'm in the Los Angeles area right now. But growing up in Alabama, our family did go on several trips. We took a lot of road trips around the US, but we didn't really travel internationally. So my first real experience with Japan came much later in life, like well after college, primarily traveled for work. So during these business trips, usually you're just stuck in meetings or whatnot, but as we'll talk about later, I tried to get out as much as possible to look around. So writing is not my full-time job, like Laurie's mentioned, this is my first book. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. I've worked at various places like NASA, some solar energy companies, but I also work for Universal Studios and Disney, designing rides and attractions for theme parks. So this is kind of how I got to travel to Japan. And like I said, I had been to Japan before briefly, but never really had much time to look around and see much. So,
Is that like one of the reasons why you like wanted to travel to Japan? Like, is that what I guess was your start for traveling to Japan?
Yeah. I can't say that I was like dying to go to Japan or anything like that before. I really didn't know that much about it. But when I was working on a brand new ride system for Shanghai Disneyland, there was a ride called Pirates of the Caribbean. You guys all know, but it was a brand new system that we were building, but it was actually being designed and built in Japan, and then shipped over to China before being installed and everything. So I had to travel to Japan over the course of that project many times to work with the engineers in Japan. And after that project, I also worked on some new rides for Tokyo Disney Sea, which meant even more travel to Japan. And this time it was actually for a Japanese park, so I got to really spend a lot of time there. So over the course of 4 or 5 years, I took like over 50 trips to Japan. And I tried to take as much time, off the weekends or whatever, try to make some short day trips outside of the normal cities that I was based at. So, initially, of course, I went to all the big cities, Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto. But really, I kind of fell in love with the food and the culture and everything during those trips. So I wanted to venture out more into the rest of the country to see, quote unquote, the real Japan.
Was there any hesitation before you were going out to more, I guess, lesser known areas of Japan?
A little bit. Yeah, for sure. I mean, people might think I'm really adventurous now, which I think I would say I am, but, a while ago, I wasn't. Many years ago, I wasn't. And what really changed that, I think, was how Japan was so safe. It made me feel really safe, organized, kind of everything was clean. I really didn't have to worry about much. And people there, of course, were so nice to foreigners, always trying to help you out. They would go out of their way to make sure you weren't lost and whatnot. So quickly, I felt at ease traveling around Japan, and I was always. And then I kind of, as I learned more about it, I was always looking for something unique, something that you can't really see anywhere else in the world. And so there were several places like that in Japan that interested me. So speaking of traveling to Japan, let me show you some of the maps. We'll share here. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So before one of my earlier trips, I just found this simple map of the Shinkansen or the bullet train. And it could kind of showed you could make a train trip from one end of Japan all the way to the other, with a few side branches. Wasn't too daunting. Unlike this map of Tokyo, this is the Tokyo subway system, or the Osaka JR system. These maps were just utterly confusing to me in the early days. It's still confusing, probably. But going back to Shinkansen, I felt like this was something I could tackle, gave me a good goal to shoot for. I love trains to begin with. So, and the public transportation in Japan is so train-based that I was instantly drawn to it and felt really comfortable traveling across. And I wanted to travel across Japan as much as possible. So the first line I took was a Tokaido Shinkansen from Osaka to Kyoto, to Tokyo. And of course, along the way, I saw Mount Fuji, and this was magnificent. So I added the photo to this map. By the way, Mount Fuji is usually obscured by clouds, so you won't get this good of a view. I was really lucky to even see it, but this is a picture I took from the train window. Then I took some other trains, the Joetsu line to Niigata, the Sanyo and the Kyushu lines. I went to Hiroshima and Kagoshima. But pretty soon it became obvious that, this map was not going to have enough room. So I started with a new map. And I added the Shinkansen lines. And then I added some sites that I saw along the way. I started in Osaka, like I said. saw Osaka Castle, Universal Studios, Japan. I went to a baseball game. Yeah, pretty typical visit, I would say, right?
Mm.
Went to Nara, saw the deer, at Nara Park. Went to Nagoya. I was able to see a sumo tournament. That was pretty interesting. Went to Mount Fuji, Tokyo, of course, Tokyo Disneyland. I was working there, so I was there a lot. Tokyo Tower. Went all the way up north to Aomori. Went to an onsen in Niigata. Down and further to Nagano. Went skiing there one winter. So pretty easy to get around is what I'm trying to say. Kanazawa here with the sushi, that was excellent. Kyoto, of course, temples, Hiroshima, Fukuoka, and so forth. All pretty typical places. Yeah, the major cities really. Then I traveled even more, and this time I tried to kind of go some of the lesser known places in between the big cities. And, I just kept adding, kept going more, more. So, yeah, I went to 40 out of the 47 prefectures so far. I rode every mile of the Shinkansen, every line in both directions. But I never went with a tour group or any organized trips, really. I just kind of went on my own. And I don't speak any Japanese. I speak very little Japanese. So if I could do it, I think most people would have no difficulties.
So how did you find like a lot of these places? Because I feel like for most of us that are like maybe don't know Japan too well or have gone and they're like, don't want to go to most of the touristy places. Like, how did you find a lot of these places?
Mostly just word of mouth. Since I was working in Japan, there was a lot of Japanese coworkers that I could ask and talk about, interesting places to go. But also just doing random internet searches. There are some websites specifically geared towards sort of the unusual kind of places to go. Some of them are just crazy unusual and very difficult to get to. And that's not kind of what I was after. I was more after, you can go see Kyoto, obviously. Okay, that's great. But if you take 30-minute detour, you can go see something completely different that you mostly never heard of before. So those are the kind of interesting things I was looking for.
Mm. So how did you come to like write your book? Like, why did you want to write your book?
So as I was traveling, let me stop sharing here. Okay. As I was traveling, I never really planned on writing the book. I didn't take any notes or even think about someday collecting all these stories. The book was really a product of the COVID-19 lockdowns last year. I was last in Japan in March of 2020. And when I returned home, the pandemic, everything was just getting started. The office actually told me to stay home for 2 weeks just to be sure. But then only after a week, the entire office shut down and went remote. And, like everyone, I thought it'd be over in a few months. But more than a year later, I'm still stuck at home, not able to travel, particularly to Japan. So I was at home just looking through some old photos, and videos. I was working on a YouTube video, actually, of all the prefectures that I visited. When I just kind of realized, wow, I really did see a lot of the country, that I've seen a lot of the interesting aspects of the culture. And so I thought, well, that could be an interesting book. And I always wanted to write a book. So that just kind of started growing from there. I should explain, it's not a typical travel guidebook. It's really meant to inspire travel more than provide the details of exactly, how to get somewhere. Yeah, I think you can find that online pretty easily. So I'm just trying to inform the reader mostly about things that maybe they never heard of before, that sounds interesting, so that they then can look into it more themselves and try to find, other interesting places. And then I also wanted to preserve the memories kind of for myself, And I like going back and reading about it also.
Yeah, there's always something else that you can like be like, oh, like I remember this, and then like look back on it. And then when you go back eventually, right, you can be like, oh, there's something else that I can do that's like similar to that or like in that same area.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I guess like the next question, like what were some of your like favorite experiences in Japan?
Yeah, so as much as I love the big cities, and I'm not saying don't go to those big cities, you should definitely see those. But I really enjoyed getting out into the countryside. Most people don't know like 70% of Japan is covered with forests and mountains. There's vast stretches of just beautiful nature, and places where you would unlikely to see another foreigner or another tourist. So those places kind of interested me. Seeing the natural beauty, Nagano, like I said, the Japanese Alps, or go through Nagano. Toyama Prefecture has Kurobe Gorge, is one of the deepest canyons in Japan. And even in hot summers, it's nice and cool there, and you can go hiking, and it's just beautiful places. Hokkaido, obvious, of course, you little maybe difficult it's a little farther away from the big cities, but you can certainly get there easily enough. And I went there to go skiing like most people do, but then I kind of sought out some of the unusual things that you could do there. Like we saw a curling tournament. We went dog sledding out in the countryside. In the winters, even though Hokkaido is not that far north, it still gets very cold. It's so cold that the sea actually freezes on the northern coast, and you can actually go on an ice-breaking boat. There's a few boats that take passengers out into the ice floe, and that was just like a completely unique experience that I don't know where else you could do that outside of like Russia or, somewhere very far away. So, and see some other memorable trips. I did a biking trip. You guys probably heard of the Shimanami Kaido. There's a string of islands, like 6 or 7 islands that stretch from Hiroshima to Ehime prefectures, and is connected by a long bike path. And with bike rental shops, repair shops, restaurants, and convenience stores, all along the way. So it's a real fantastic way to see the natural beauty of that area. Some spectacular ocean views. I also got to climb Mount Fuji, which a lot of people do. I did it twice, so usually once is enough. There's a saying in Japan that goes something like, if you go to Japan and don't climb Mount Fuji once, then you're a fool. But if you climb it more than once, you're a bigger fool. Yeah. But the reason why I climbed it more than once is on our first climb, me and my friends, we got hit with a typhoon. I mean, we literally a rain and wind, a storm of over 40 miles an hour, and we could barely stand at some points. So we still made it to the summit, but we couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead of us. So we took some selfies at the top, with a completely gray background. And so we tried again a year later, and then we saw one of the clearest and most beautiful sunrises, ever. So that's definitely worth doing. I dedicated, a whole section of the book on nature, because that's one of the big parts of the culture, so to speak. One other memorable trip I took was seeing the earthquake and tsunami damage in the Fukushima area. While it's not like a happy, type of enjoyment, it was really a powerful experience. And I would highly recommend that, going there. And the locals there were very inviting, and they want, tourists to come in not only to raise money and tourism and all that, but just to kind of, to remember what happened. It was only 10 years ago, and probably people in the big city don't really think about that too much, while those affected prefectures are still today trying to recover. So that was a very moving experience.
Yeah, we don't hear a lot about that too much, like the big earthquake and stuff too much anymore. But it's for sure something that, like, I feel like Japanese Americans as well, like that's something that we need to know because it had such a big impact on Japan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess the next question, do you have any future travels to Japan, like travel plans to Japan?
I like to see Kyushu more, and I've been to Kyushu a couple of times, but one thing I read about was there's this luxury train called the Seven Stars. It's like an overnight train that goes all around Kyushu, serves some of the fantastic meals, using all the local ingredients and things. And it's like a Michelin star restaurant on wheels, and or like a big cruise on land or something. That sounded pretty good. Another one, actually, Okinawa would be nice. Obviously it's far, but that would be nice to go. But what I really want to do is, there are these string of islands that are part of Tokyo. And Tokyo, obviously, central Japan, but stretching hundreds of miles to the south, there's a long string of islands, Hachijo, Aogashima, Ogasawara, and you never heard of these places, right? I never did. Ogasawara is one of the farther away islands, and you can still get there from Tokyo. You can take a ferry. There's a ferry. It takes 24 hours. It's only once a week. So Imagine you take this ferry, you're on it for 24 hours, you get there, ferry leaves, and then you have to wait a week for it to come back for you. And of course, it's just very remote, tropical getaway though, but the scenery there is just spectacular. So I haven't been there, but I've only seen photos, but I definitely want to go somewhere like that.
So as a, I guess, non-Japanese like speaker and everything, like how, like, do you have some tips for people who like maybe don't speak or understand Japanese, or just like are kind of hesitant for going to Japan?
Yeah. Like I said, it's so safe and easy for foreigners to travel around. And I think you should just go for it and don't worry so much. There's not as much English actually as other countries that I've been to, but still don't let that deter you. Most Japanese people do understand some English. They're just very hesitant to speak it themselves. Plus, within the Japanese language itself, there's so many loan English words that, chances are if you say the English, they might already know it. But some specific tips, I would say get a rail pass. I use the JR rail pass quite a bit. It's for foreigners. You can buy it here prior to going to Japan. And then it allows you to almost unlimited access of the train system, including the Shinkansen. And then there are different versions, 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, whatever. And it's like, I don't know, $300 for the 1 week one. If you're going to travel between, say, Osaka and Tokyo and back, it's worth getting because trains can actually get pretty expensive, even if you take short trips here and there. Speaking of trains, definitely get a train app. I use an app called Hyperdia, and you can just type in where you are, where you want to go, or what time, whatever, and then it'll tell you exactly which train to take. And trains in Japan, I think most of they run, to the minute or to the second, usually. So it's very easy when the app tells you go to platform 9 at 12:05, you go there and it's pretty easy. So language skills, I said I don't speak any Japanese, but definitely pick up some phrases. I use some podcasts online to pick up some survival phrases. That I think went a really long way of trying to kind of, it kind of shows that you're trying and people in Japan, and they're much more open to trying to help you if you can say a few words, and I think that goes a long way. I
Cool.
watched.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
like, cool, thank you.
No.
I definitely didn't know. Like, I know, like, yeah, like finding ways to learn the language is good,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
like the train app, I didn't even think about like, oh,
Okay.
maybe that would be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I didn't find it till kind of later in my travels. So like in the first few trips, it would take me forever to get somewhere where it should have just taken like 10 minutes. So it helps a great deal. And it helps a great deal to plan something out in advance too. And that's one thing uh, people in Japan do a lot is they make a lot of advanced reservations. Everything is very well organized and planned. So oftentimes you might go somewhere to only find out that it's already sold out. So much more so than the US. So I would say definitely do some research and do some early planning if you can. I mean, spontaneous trips are great, but just doing a little bit of pre-planning will go a long way. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about like the process of writing your book, like how long it took, your editing process?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, like I said, I was locked down at home. I had the initial idea and the rough outline of kind of like the random stories and places that I wanted to mention in the book. Then I brainstormed some content with some friends and just sort of how to structure the book. I think that was the hardest thing. Is there might be a lot of interesting content, but how do you organize it into a single cohesive book, right? So once I kind of figured that out, I collected more notes. Like I said, I wasn't planning on writing a book, so that was one of the hardest part. Was trying to go back and remember a lot of the details. Luckily, I had a lot of photos and things, but and then I wrote then writing the rough draft. It actually only took me like 7 weeks, so that was pretty fast, I thought, for the rough draft. And then I did like an initial editing pass. I got an editor, which actually took a while to find a professional editor. He did an assessment, did a first pass with some notes. I talked to him, via Zoom quite a bit, and then I did all the rewriting. He sent me a bunch of notes, but I did the rewrite edits maybe like 2 or 3 times with the editor, 3 rounds. So that took about 3 months, another 3 months, I'd say. And then you got to work on the cover design. I got some volunteers to help read some early drafts and give me some feedback. And then like another final rewrite. Then you have to format it for publishing. So all in all, like 6 months is what it took. None of it actually all of it was very fun and not very difficult. I thought it just kind of, since I had a lot of time, at home anyway, it was really a good time to do this. What I found difficult was after getting it published, sort of advertising and marketing and doing all that, which I had never have any experience doing. So those were difficult. I should note that I published on Amazon, just basically self-published. You just have to use their format, their software, upload it, and it's actually a very fast and easy process. But they don't give you any help, so you have to do all the proofreading, editing, and everything, including all the marketing. And that's the hard part. Is if you had a traditional publisher, they would probably help you do all the advertising and marketing. But since you're just kind of doing this on your own, you don't get that. But it's a lot easier to publish. It's a lot cheaper. You end up, I think, making more money from them. But it's a trade-off.
Yeah, thank you so much, Phil. So I guess now we can kind of go into Q&A. And there are actually quite a few questions.
Oh,
I guess we can kind of go into the ones that talk about your book.
mhm.
Joanne asked, was it difficult to find a publisher?
So like I said, I used Amazon, so that part was very easy. They don't require any money upfront. They only publish books on demand. They print on demand, so there's no upfront cost at all. For every book they sell, you get a much larger percentage than a traditional publisher. And like I said, the only downside being the marketing is not as supportive from them, or there's no support for marketing. So you have to kind of do that all yourself.
And then let's see, next question. Kelly asked, how long were most of your trips? Kaiseki length, like weekenders or
Mm-hmm.
longer?
Yeah, most of my business trips were they were 1 week to 3 weeks long. So most of them were like 2 weeks. So I did have a weekend off, so in between to do something. If you only had 1 week there, then it's very hard to do. But oftentimes, my flight back from Japan is in the evening, right? So you actually have a lot of time in the morning to go do something. I actually went to Kamakura from Tokyo one morning before a flight and got back, in time. And I got to see a lot of things actually. So there are things you can squeeze in.
Let's see. Another question from Lynn. Do you make hotel reservations in advance?
Yes, usually since I was on a business trip, that was kind of taken care of by my company. But let's say I went on a personal weekend trip or something, then yeah, I would make those hotel reservations in advance. There's actually a funny story in the book about me getting stuck without a hotel room and what I had to do to survive that night. So you can read about that.
Let's see. Another question. I don't know
Mhm.
who the person is, but they asked, was it hard to
Mhm.
get tickets to the sumo tournaments, and what months are the tournaments held?
I think there are several tournaments throughout the year held in different cities. I forget what exact months. You can find that online. It was hard to get tickets. Like I said, everything is pre-planned in Japan. So, by the time I wanted to look and get tickets, it was sold out. But luckily, a friend told me that they do reserve a few tickets for that day. So my friend and I showed up at 6 a.m. and got in line and were able to get a ticket. So after that, yeah. So there are ways to get things last minute.
Let's see. Another question. Is there an
Mhm.
app for hotels or inns in small towns and villages off the beaten path?
There are. A lot of times what I do is go on Google Maps, and if you search the area around, you might see a hotel pop up, and you can search for that hotel online. Hotels.com actually has a lot of these small hotels on there. But if not, there are some Japanese catered sites that have hotels. I think it's called Japan I Can or something like that. I'm trying to remember. But yeah, you can find a lot of the small hotels online. No problem.
Let's see. Next question. So regions have different food specialties. Did anything stand out for you?
So one of the fun things you can do is when you go to a different region, ask the people there, oh, what is this region known for? And they'll always have an answer like, oh, the soba is great here, or the sushi, or something. So definitely try to do that, and then try to get those recommendations and try them out. My favorite would be, I know it's kind of boring, but sushi. I mean, I never really liked sushi before going to Japan, and then after getting some of the really high end sushi, there's no going back.
Let's see. Um, How did you travel to places not served by trains or planes?
It's very hard. So luckily, trains go almost everywhere in Japan. So you can get pretty close to your destination by train. And then you might have to take a bus at that point, at worst case, or a taxi, maybe if it's even some smaller cities will have some taxis. Of course, none of the drivers out in the countryside speak English. So definitely be prepared with printouts or whatever of places that you want to go that you can show the taxi drivers. Buses, like I said, but buses are very difficult, I found, to navigate because they don't run exactly on time like the trains. You don't have big train stations with English names on them. So figuring out when to get on a bus, also when to get off, because oftentimes if you don't push the button, they don't even stop at the next stop. So it's hard.
Okay, this one's about sports. So how is pricing compared to the US with sporting activities like skiing and baseball?
I found skiing much cheaper than California or Colorado. And just as good, if not better. You know, the snow in Hokkaido is just amazing, and Nagano. I mean, they had two Winter Olympics there, right? Hokkaido and Nagano. So amazing skiing, highly recommended. What was the other part?
Baseball.
Baseball. Baseball was, I would say, also a little bit cheaper. It's hard. It was hard for me to get tickets. I had to go through a special sort of English website. But other times when my Japanese friends got tickets for us, they were, very reasonable. So, and they're much more fun though than in the US. The Japanese baseball games are way better.
All right, we'll take a few more questions and then we'll wrap up. Okay. What are some cultural mistakes that travelers should avoid committing? That's a good question.
I mean, I think there's plenty of websites or YouTube videos that tell you stuff not to do. Main things like talking loudly on trains and things like that. Eating on trains or eating while walking on the streets. There's some. Just follow what other people do. I mean, that really is the best advice, I think. Just look around you, and if no one's talking on the phone, you should not be talking on the phone, probably.
Okay. What are some things to be careful of or watch out for in Japan?
Like I said, it's very safe. I was never worried about safety or crime or anything like that. Maybe one thing you can watch out for is high prices because things can get really expensive. Luckily, when I was traveling on business, right, business meals and everything, hotels are taken care of by the company. But if you're on vacation, you could easily spend hundreds of dollars on a meal, and hopefully you knew that going in. I hope you don't make a mistake of ordering something or whatever, going to a very fancy restaurant and spending too much.
Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to navigate some things here. Let's see. I guess we can do a few more questions. Sorry. Okay. What are some places in Japan that are disappearing that you would recommend visiting? This person says they've read a lot about rural places that are vanishing due to population influx to the urban centers.
Right. Yeah, there's plenty of cities and or towns, small villages that the population is so low that like all their schools are closing and things like that. But I honestly can't say I had experience visiting any of those kind of places. Yeah, I don't know.
Let's see. Next question. Did you attend any of the festivals during Obon season? How did you find out when and where they were located? Do they run through the whole summer like in SoCal, or is it just a certain amount of time occurring all throughout Japan?
If you're talking about the Obon season, I think that's a very distinctive time, right? And I forget when that is, but I generally try to stay away from Japan during all those times because it just gets so crowded. So I would, personally, I attended festivals, things way off the beaten path. There's some stories in the book about seeing like a Japanese bullfight and a kite battling festival, but those were hours and hours away from Tokyo and not very well known. So I tried to stick with all the smaller festivals.
Okay, for someone on a vegan diet, are protein options readily available, such as tofu, edamame, beans, and nuts?
I think so. I'm not a vegan, but I do have some friends who are, and Tokyo is getting a little bit better. Out in the countryside, I would say you might have some difficulty. I mean, tofu obviously is popular, but fish and meat is so predominantly popular that you might have difficulty outside of the big cities.
And then for those that may not have your book, could you explain like how your book is kind of organized?
Sure. So it's a title, cultural kaiseki, and like Lori said, kaiseki. So kaiseki is like a traditional Japanese meal that you guys probably know. And I start the book about attending a kaiseki meal and how I was introduced into the culture that way. So I'm just flipping through the book. So I divided the book into a few parts. Part one is sort of like culture, sort of the art, the way Japanese really promotes artisans and traditions in that matter. There's also part on traditions. There's a part on nature, like I said, and there's food. So yeah, I end the book with there's several chapters on some of my favorite foods and restaurants. Makes me hungry every time.
Okay, I guess the last question from the audience. So for yen, should it be bought in the US before you go, or the best place in Japan to get good exchange rates to transfer dollars for yen?
Yeah, I typically get it in Japan, and I always just go to a bank and get it with my own ATM card. And then the exchange rate is whatever your bank is charging, which is usually way better than any of those exchange places, like at the airport. I generally don't use those counters because they're pretty expensive.
And then I guess my questions now. So do you have any future book releases based on your other past or future travel destinations?
I don't have any plans, but I'm now that I wrote this first book, I'm kind of out on the lookout for other ideas, and I definitely want to travel the world more. Definitely want to travel Japan more, but soon as we're allowed to, I definitely want to get back and try to get some more ideas. Yeah.
And then have you ever thought of documenting your travels through other sorts of media, like doing vlogs or short videos like the Reels feature on Instagram?
Yeah, so I do have a YouTube channel. It's called Adventures with Phil. But it's not something I try to do full time. It's more just like my vacation videos or holiday videos or things that I make on the side that I just upload for friends and family.
And then is there a place where people can find you on social media, if they have social media, to see like where else you've gone and then also where you'll be headed in the future?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at cultural_kaiseki.
Yeah, so I dropped those links for Phil's YouTube and also his Instagram handle if you guys would like to check him out. I also, somewhere in like the middle, I've dropped the link for his website, and it also has all of his stuff there. Phil, any last words or words of wisdom for our group for tonight?
No, I mean, thank you all for attending and the interest. Check out the book. I think it has some other interesting stories or places that you guys might want to see that's sort of unusual. It's by no means, a expert view on anything. It's just my personal experiences, and I intend to add to it, hopefully, in the future.
Thank you. So that kind of wraps up tonight's author talk with Phil. Thank you all for joining us tonight, especially Phil for just providing us with some tips and telling us about your travel experiences. And then on behalf of the center, I thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you're from the Bay Area, come and check out the center and come and visit Japantown. The center is open. Just make sure when you do come visit, make sure you wear a mask. But if you're not from the area, you can still check out the center. We have virtual programs that are running. So there are different, what's it called? There are different programs and also events that the center holds that can be found virtually. So if you'd like to participate, feel free. And also, if you'd like to revisit this webinar, we've recorded the whole session and we will be posting it on YouTube, the recording on YouTube. And we will also be posting it on our Facebook page and our website as well. We'll also send out the links, the recording links to your emails as well. Oh yeah, Phil, if you want to show your video, sorry, I totally forgot about
that.
Sorry.
All right.
Two more minutes of your time.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see. This is just a really short video of some of the places that were mentioned in the book, and just kind of put it together. Here we go. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Yeah, that concludes our program for tonight. So thank you all for coming.
Bye. Thanks, Laurie.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Phil.
Yeah.